Welcome back to another live show this morning, episode 54 of Virtual Coffee with Francois. Very nice to have you back with us. And I see there's quite a number of people already over on YouTube saying good morning and hi and welcome to Sandro, who's going to be my special guest today. Really happy that he agreed to be on the show. I will introduce him to you in a second. Just first want to say welcome to each and every single one of you. If you're watching the recording, welcome to you as well. Thank you for taking the time to see what it is that we do and for being a part of the community. I deeply appreciate that. And without you, we don't have a show. So I think that's a very important thing to always remember for me and to remember where we've come from. You know, we started off small and we slowly we're growing. And I'm really, really fortunate and grateful for all of your support and all of your help. So thank you very much for that. Let me hop on over here to my friends on LinkedIn this morning first. Let me see if we are live over there. Yes, we are. So fantastic. So let me just say good morning to you all. Good morning, Renata and Francis. Good morning. Welcome. Guys, if you're there, please say hi. If you're new, let me sort of share this with you. Please engage with us. Please like the video and share with everybody. And then in the comment or in the chat section, engage with one another. This is about building relationships. You're welcome to ask your questions to Sandro and myself this morning as well. More than willing to answer those questions for you. So please make use of this opportunity. It's a huge, huge opportunity to have somebody like Sandro with us this morning. There's some great insights, some great lessons and practical things that you're going to learn this morning. And he's a phenomenal person and really looking forward to chatting to him. So if you're over on YouTube, please remember to subscribe. And if you're on LinkedIn, connect with me. You're welcome. And I look forward to engaging with you. Let me see quickly who's here on YouTube this morning. Wow, huge number of people. Good morning, Quibus. He's saying a very good morning to you, Sandro, as well. I'll bring you on now. And he's saying that we are honored to have you on our professional community show at a critical period. It is very critical at the moment. And specifically with us in South Africa, I think not knowing exactly what's going on. And there's a whole host of things happening and the lockdowns and everything. So, people are unsure. And we've been doing a lot of work to help people through this. But I think today is going to bring so much value. So thank you for your willingness and your to share your time and your knowledge from that point. So Raymond, good morning. Denise, Stephen, Renee, we've got Malcolm. Good morning, Malcolm. Ian McMaster, Chart, Bongi, Rizan, Mark Dimitriadis, Arun. Good morning, Arun. And we've also got Terence in the house, Gary Walker, Raymond Visser, Casper, Russell, Hazel Peters. Hazel, it's the first time I've seen you here. Good morning. Welcome. Thank you very much for joining us. It's maybe the first time you're saying hi, but thank you very much. I really appreciate you being here. It's awesome to have all of you here. Alrighty, just maybe two quick things before I introduce Sandra to you. I saw that, by the way, so I don't know if you've seen this, but WhatsApp, if you move to the latest version of WhatsApp, you can now have 8 people on a video call and not only 4. And then there's been a lot of updates around Zoom, so you need to be aware of those. I'll probably do a session on Zoom again that you've got to upgrade now to version 5 to get the latest security updates and the encryption and all that kind of stuff. But I'll talk about that. I just quickly wanted to make you aware of that. And then I want to ask you one question. Now, I keep on forgetting to ask you this question, and you can just say yes or no down in the chat or the comments. Is that, should I allow my wife to cut my hair? So that's the question this morning. Should I allow my wife to cut my hair? I know it's time. I'm overdue. So that's the question. If you say yes, she'll do it. If you say no, I don't know. She'll probably still do it, but let's see. All righty, let me get on with this morning. Ladies and gentlemen, it is really my privilege this morning to welcome to the show Mr. Sandro Forte. Sandro runs his own financial planning practice over in the UK. I'm going to let him introduce himself to you. But Sandro, from my side, really, you're a phenomenal guy. You speak all over the world. You're very involved, and you're also part of MDRT, and you have a whole host of courses or programs that you run, and you have a podcast and all sorts of interesting things, which we'll get into today. But from my side, a very warm South African welcome. We appreciate you being here.
Thank you, Francois. I'm not sure how I can introduce myself, but after you listed off all those things that I do, clearly I have a low boredom threshold. But it's a great privilege. We have a mutual friend in Cobus, as you know, who's one of the nicest men on the planet. He's been instrumental in shaping me as a human being. And you had a very good friend of mine on the show last week, Ross Bernstein. There's just so many wonderful people in the world, and I'm a humble part of a very big picture. So all I've tried to do over the years is give back as much as I've taken, and I think sometimes we lose a little bit of focus on that. You know, if you put things into perspective and you reflect back, you often realize, if you're really honest with yourself, that we all take far more than we give. So all I've ever tried to do is just to, you know, hand something back to society, and of course to my fellow professionals. So yeah, I'm delighted to be on the show.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you very much, Sandra. It's yeah, it's actually been. I was thinking on the weekend when I was thinking about the show and what we're going to be talking about, etc. That it's actually a pity that I haven't had the privilege to see you live and see you speak in person. But hopefully that day will come. And I mean, you've got a very interesting surname for me. I did a bit of research on Forte, which is because it's an interesting. I mean, Forte. Also, if you look at the meaning of the word Forte, it's when you are an expert at, you know, you're very good at something. So obviously, I don't know if you ever realized that, but that's sort of the literal definition of Forte. But I know, you know, I mean, you could have probably pursued a career in hotels or something. I know there's a guy. I don't know if it's family or you're related or anything, but I mean, you could have pursued a career in hotels with a surname like Forte?
Yeah, you know, you're right. I'm very proud to be part of a fairly well-known family in the hospitality industry. But my great uncle, Charles Forte, he was the one that started what became the largest hotel group in the world, and it was taken over in 1996. It was a big hostile takeover. It was big news at the time. But I suppose, Francois, it would have been my destiny, I guess, being about the fourth generation of Fortes since it started way back when. But my father passed away when I was very young. I was 9 years old. I was the eldest of 4 children. My mum was a widow at the age of 29. And I remember those words that she shared with me at the time. She said to me, I don't know whether it was deliberate or whether it was just, you know, in passing, but she said to me, "You're the man of the house now." And in that moment, I realized I had an obligation to do everything I could to provide for my family. And so my course took a very different path in the sense that I spent a lot of time, as so many teenagers do, wondering what I wanted to do for a living. And I thought about all kinds of stuff, and we haven't got the time to go through the list. But suffice to say, I got to university still not knowing what I wanted to do. All I knew was that I had to make some kind of financial provision. It was my responsibility. And I started working, frankly, by accident for a financial services firm near my hometown in the West Country in England. And it was those next 4 years that really shaped my future career. So it didn't go down very well that I was the first in 4 generations not to go into the hospitality business. I have to say, a poor relation. I think I did a family tree exercise, and I think I have to kill 87 relatives all at the same time for me to inherit any kind of serious money. So on the basis that I probably couldn't get away with that, I had to decide to do something else.
Yeah, maybe obviously decide to take matters into your own hands and make your own destiny. And I think that is amazing. And I mean, you started in this business when you were 21, if I'm not mistaken. And I mean, if you think about, like, apart from not starting off with anything, I guess there's no prospects, there's no knowledge, there's no expertise, there's no nothing. I mean, you literally started from scratch, if you ever could start from scratch. Can you still remember how you did that? You know, you're so young. I think it's in financial services, particularly, to be that young and to work in this business, and then in a matter of 2 years, you know, get to a decent level of production. You know, if I say decent, I mean like way above average. You know, can you still remember how you did that?
Like it was yesterday, honestly, like it was yesterday. So just to put things into perspective for everyone listening and joining us today, the first 2 years were not good at all, and they were not good for a number of reasons. And everyone tuning into the show today will have experienced this at one point or another. For me, Francois, I made the classic mistake. I made the classic mistake of believing that an excuse was a really good way of avoiding activity, because, as we all know, when you feel comfortable, you feel good, because we are conditioned to be comfortable. And it took me 2 years to realize that success in this business is not comfortable. If you read any book, if you talk to any successful entrepreneur, and I'm thinking about Richard Branson, Steve Jobs, anybody whose book you've read about success, they all mention the same thing. You know, it was difficult. But I just spent 2 years making excuses. I played golf with my friends. Oh, I'll just take care of it tomorrow. You know, all the stuff that you do. I was 21 years old. I looked 14. I mean, genetically, I'm very lucky because I've always looked a bit younger than I actually am. I'm not sure that's true now as I approach 52. But all that time ago, I looked very young, and so young, in fact, that when I had my 18th birthday, my mum had to come to my nightclub where my party was being held just to convince the bouncers that I was old enough to get into my own 18th birthday party. So, you know, what I'm saying here is that I had a number of challenges to face, not least the fact that I look young. And of course, when you're meeting prospects for the first time, notwithstanding the fact that I had to find some prospects in the first place, but when I did, you know, I knew I had a challenge, and that challenge was, I've got a prospect sitting here, maybe a 55 and a 54-year-old man and woman, the stereotypical family, who were looking at me thinking, you know, what on earth does this lad know that we don't, and what can he do to help us with our financial planning? And one of the things that I've always learned, and it took me a couple of years, but one of the things I learned was we have to find ways to overcome some of these challenges. And I am a huge believer, Francois, that if you flip anything on its head, you know, we've got loads of challenges at the moment. We all have difficulties and obstacles to deal with in this business. But if you flip something 180, I guarantee you will find something positive on the other side. We just have to be prepared to look at it that way. So what I did was I thought of the reasons why people might want to deal with a 21-year-old. And I know there's a lot of people tuning in today that might be new to the business, and they're worried about a lack of experience, or the fact they haven't got the qualifications yet, or the product knowledge. And I learned very quickly it's not about any of those things. So what I used to say to my prospects was, as part of my preamble, I call it a positioning piece now, I'm sure we'll come on to talk about that. But what I used to say to them was, now I know what you're thinking. You're thinking this guy looks really, really young, and what does he know that we don't already? And what I found I did was I was disarming the negative thought in their mind very early in the process, so it didn't become an objection. And they kind of nod, you know, in appreciation of the fact that I'd identified that this was a real issue. And I said, but don't worry, because although I know I look very young, and in fact I'm 21 years old, I can provide something for you that everyone else in the UK can't provide. And they kind of look at me and say, well, what's that, Sandro? And I'd say long-term service, because the average age of the financial advisor in the UK is 55. And they'd laugh about it, but it broke the ice. And then you could see them thinking, well, actually, you know what? I'd rather have a long-term relationship than, you know, somebody who knows a lot about his subject that's going to do what stereotypically most advisors do, which is sell us a policy and then we don't see them for 10 years. So I've always found a way of, one, being really honest about some of the challenges I face, and then simply finding the solutions. And all I've done throughout the world now, 81, 82 countries and counting, that I've taken some of these messages, is I have systematically gone through every part of we'll call it the sales process, but I don't believe it's a sales process. But I go through every single part of the process, and I have created a process, a method of connecting with new prospects, being world-class on the telephone, handling objections, closing, asking great questions, social media connections, becoming more visible. And if you bolt all of those things together, you don't need to be expert at anything. You just need to follow a process that works every single time. And if you know you've got that, motivation takes care of itself, which is why I insist to people, I'm not a motivational speaker, because I'm not going to sit here on your fantastic show today and start telling people how great they are. Why? Because this time tomorrow, that feeling will have worn off and we'll be back to where we were. So to your question, yeah, there were lots of challenges in the first 2 years. It took me a lot of time to work it all out. But once I had, and I'd started to put this process in place, the business took off, and my financial services practice, still very small, I hasten to add, but a very, very high producing business, working with, you know, sports stars and celebrities and high net worth individuals, but families too. You know, I think it's very, very important to keep grounded in this business. And my mantra is that we just simply need to communicate our message. It's not about skill, it's about communication. And if you were to go and stand on a street corner, Francois, with a sandwich board saying, come and buy your life insurance here, the reality is some people would approach you, some people would speak with you. So the reality is, for most of us, is we simply don't communicate enough. And when we do, we're not skilled enough to convert that message into a positive financial outcome.
Yeah, and what I enjoyed sort of when I was smiling, that's why I brought myself sometimes back onto the camera just to show that I'm smiling. And as you then said, and then people would laugh at me because that is just a natural trigger. You know, I can provide you with long-term service. But there's a very valuable lesson in that, is that if you know what the objections are to whatever, because you had a choice, you could have said, well, I'm young, let me rather go play soccer or rugby or cricket or something, and not, you know, wait until I get older and then try again. But what you did was to say, well, I'm going to look at this and say, well, what are these objections, if you will, that I'm getting? What are they saying to me to say like this? These are the reasons why we uncomfortable maybe to do business with you, or why we don't trust you yet. And then you build that into the process to sort of, let's talk about this even before they can, because you know what they're thinking. And that's an important lesson. And I think we sometimes forget to go back to those, because those are almost basics that we forget about, and that we don't, you know, keep on doing in our businesses. We don't keep, and now there's new objections coming up with the situation that we're finding ourselves in. So there are new reasons why people can't meet with us, they can't speak to us, they can't, you know, do business, or they want to cancel policies or whatever that may be. And so it's important to understand those things so we can work those, you know, the answers to those questions or those objections into our messaging. I mean, has that all been part of why you've been able to maintain, you know, your track record in terms of that? Is it because you keep on that process and you keep on making the process better? You've been part of MDRT now for a long time, top of the table, you know, the entire time. I don't know how long it's been, 28 years or something. You know, and to keep that motivation levels that high, you know, like I think some people think that we are just inherently positive or inherently motivated. But do you think that the process that you've built, does that play a major role going into that? Or how have you managed to maintain those levels of motivation?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. Look, I have bad days. You know, I'm not superhuman. I have plenty of days where I think, you know what, I feel like giving this all up. You know, I'm sure there's plenty of other things I can do, or let me spend more time speaking, and I'm not going to waste my time with all these people who keep throwing objections at me for no particular reason. So to put things into perspective, we all have challenges in our business. But the reason we're so well compensated for what we do is because of that. You know, the objections, the challenges, the road bumps along the way, that's what we get paid for. And, you know, the great days put the bad days into perspective, and vice versa. So as long as you retain perspective, but I think to your question, Francois, which is a very good one, look, if I were to say to everyone on this show today, if I could show you how to handle every objection 100% of the time successfully, how many calls would you start to make? And the answer is as many as I could find in my prospect list. The reason we don't make the calls, the reason we don't engage with people is because we worry about the outcome. And so what I've done over the years is shifted my focus from the outcome, which is the yes or the no, the measure by which you determine success or failure, at least that's the way we've always been taught, and focus on the things you can control. Can you control picking up the telephone? Yes. Can you control having a conversation? Yes. Can you control sharing your ideas, thoughts, business practice? Yes. Can you control the yes or no? Well, historically, no. The way I've developed things is that I believe that most of the time I can. So I've developed a 3-step process for handling an objection. And because it's based on a logical process, you can control the outcome. So what most advisors have failed to do, and through no fault of their own, but let's just be very clear about this, over the centuries that we've been selling insurance and investments, we have typically been told by a trainer, more often than not, somebody who's never sold an insurance policy in their life, we've been told that we have to kind of adopt this subservient attitude in a relationship with a new client. And what I mean by that is we find ourselves sitting at the kitchen table at 8 o'clock on a Thursday evening, and we listen to the new prospect roll out all these reasons why they can't do business with us. Well, I've got another advisor and I want to think about it. And you mentioned earlier, just off at a tangent for a second, Francois, you mentioned the reasons why people can't do business with us at the moment. I would challenge that on the basis there are no new reasons. They're just new excuses. That's all. They're not genuine reasons. They're just excuses. So one of the things that I've done is I've equipped myself with the ability to take control of the relationship. In other words, when I'm engaging with a prospect for the first time, I'm not sitting there with a fact find in my hand, asking lots of questions, waiting for the objections, and then not knowing how to handle them. So what I typically do subconsciously is create conflict by giving a counter argument or telling the client that they're wrong about that, or here's another way of looking at it. That's the wrong approach. What I do is I take control of the relationship by saying something like, Francois, we're meeting this evening for two reasons. The first reason is for us to decide whether we like, trust, and can work with each other in the long term. And by introducing the word we into the equation, subconsciously, what I'm saying to my client is, you choose whether I'm going to become your financial advisor, but I choose whether you're going to become my client. And the minute you establish that relationship, the client behaves themselves, because the one thing that we know about human nature is financial professionals hate being rejected. We all know that. But guess what? So do clients too, because they're built of the same skin and bone. So if we can create an environment where two people make a decision together, then you set off on the right foot. And the other reason we're meeting is for me to gather information to see whether I can help you. At the moment, I don't know whether I can help you or not. But the more information you give me, the better the advice I can give you. It's like going to the doctor. You wouldn't go to the doctor, sit in the seat, and then ask the doctor to guess what was wrong with you. You'd give them lots of information, and the more information, the better the diagnosis. And those two simple rules of engagement at a first meeting will always take me through to a really good outcome, because A, the client will not throw as many objections at me because they live in fear of being rejected. And if they do throw everything at me, I have the ability to say at some point during the meeting, I'm really sorry to interrupt. I get the feeling now is just not the right time for us to have this conversation. Here's my card. Give me a call in 6 months' time, or if your circumstances change. And one of two things happens. Either they say, okay, no problem, we'll call you in 6 months, and they never do. But that's okay, because I want to spend my time doing, 20,000 Rand an hour work rather than 50 Rand an hour work. And so I'd much rather grab my coat, go home, spend time with my family or friends, than waste it with a couple of people who are never going to do business with me. The other thing that might happen, and actually 7 times out of 10 in my experience, this is what happens. They say, I'm really sorry, Sandro, we've had a bad day, something's happened, got, in a bit of rush getting home from work. And they sit up in their seat and they never cause you a problem after that, because they know that you have the ability to do exactly what in the past we've empowered our clients to do, rightly or wrongly, and that is to take control of the relationship. So that is a very, very important first step in the process.
Cool. And I'm just also, as you're saying, you have this ability, obviously, to tell a client, listen, this is not the right time. I think what so many, and I did that, I'll be the first to say, I'm Francois and I did this, is that you hang on to these names because they give you hope, and it's false hope. In your deepest inside, wherever that may be, that those people are never going to do business with you. And if they are, they're not really the kind of people that maybe you wanted to do business with in the first place. Yeah. But we hang on to them because we feel like, well, there's a list of names. So hopefully when nobody else is saying yes, some point in the future, this person is going to say yes. And by being able to sort of be very clear, and I think what is the right word, to be, you're not afraid to say, listen, well, no, this is not going to go any further, or we stop this conversation here. I think that's a very powerful trait and a thing to do in such an instance. Have you worked with clients before that you thought, like, when you met them, you knew, like, I shouldn't, but you've maybe felt like you had to, or have you always had this ability to say, you know what, no, it's not, this is not for me, or was that also something you had to learn?
Again, we're not all perfect. I think I'm really lucky because I've been in the business for a long time now. There are probably 2 clients. I won't mention their names just in case they happen to be listening. But there are 2 clients with the benefit of hindsight I wish I'd not taken on. They've just they're just two people who, doesn't matter what you do for them, they always focus on the negatives. They're never grateful. I'm very old fashioned. I'm a great believer in please and thank you and turning up on time and doing all the basic things right. These two particular clients have been nothing more than a pain in the neck from the moment I took them on. But generally speaking, that prospect list that you mentioned, again, goes back to what I said earlier, Francois, which is we seek comfort in a list of names. And if I've got 20 names on a piece of paper, I can tell all my colleagues and all my friends, look at my pipeline list. It's incredible, but it's worth nothing. It's just a list of names. And one thing I know is if you've still got that list of names on a piece of paper 6 months from now, they're not prospects anymore, they're suspects. So what we've got to do is we've got to find the courage to make the calls, to have the conversations. Now, here's the thing. We worry about making the calls because we think they might say no. And once they say no, that's it. They're not a prospect anymore. But if we were to spend our time using some of the strategies that either the people listening have adopted themselves or I've adopted, or however you come by these skills, if you spend all your time and energy looking for new prospects, and there's a dozen ways at the moment. I mean, this is a world of opportunity, the best opportunity we've had in 3 generations right now. People don't see it that way because they're more focused on the problems and the challenges. But every single person that I know has ever been successful has almost reverse engineered a process, has looked at the things that everyone is doing and is doing the opposite. In other words, in the last 3 months, I have become more visible to my clients. I've made more calls, had more meetings, because all of my colleagues in the UK, all my competitors, are all still in bed, hiding under the duvet or under their desks, waiting for the problem to pass. And the one thing that I know about the current situation is people want the comfort of a communication, of a connection. If you're the person that rings to wish them a happy birthday or to say, how are you and your family? I'm not trying to sell anything. I'm just saying, how are you? How are your family? Is there anything I can do to help you? You will be astonished at the amount of business that you generate, because people will say, one, thank you so much for contacting us. This whole situation has made me realize I need to sort out my will, or I need to review my insurance arrangements, or I need to have a conversation with you about changing my investment strategy. We don't need to instigate sales. This is not about us at the moment. I really struggle when I hear advisors say, what I need to do is see you to talk to you about this. And on LinkedIn, I get messages saying, what I'd like to do is I'd like to connect with you. It's not about you. It's about your prospect. So go through your telephone book, pick up your mobile phone, scroll from A to Z, communicate, reach out to people. How can I help you? You'll be the only person doing it. And it's a no lose, because you're not asking for an order. You're not asking to make a sale. So no one's going to say no to you. But you will generate an enormous amount of goodwill, and you will be so incredibly surprised at the number of people who circle back to you or invite you to have a more detailed conversation. So this is not an easy business, but it is a really simple business if you stick to the basics. And there is true today, Francois, as they've ever been.
It's because they're built on principles. There are certain, I talk about this a lot, where there's certain principles that they don't change. The way, the angles we take, and the sort of the ways we do it, like maybe now in this time you'll do it more via, I don't know, I'm just throwing it out there, maybe through social media or online or virtual, but the principle underlying what we're doing is still remaining exactly the same. So I fully agree with you, and those are some powerful ideas and just reminders that you've shared there. You've also written a book, Sandro, called Dare to be Different. I think it's sold over 400,000 copies. It's been translated into 8 languages. I'm trying to do a first book just in my own language, and I'm still battling with that. So that's amazing. What makes this book so popular?
Well, look, I'll be honest, it's not a literary classic, that's for sure. But number one, I'm an action guy, and I would strongly encourage everyone that's involved in the show today to just find a way to take some positive action. We don't need to overthink the outcome. So I wasn't for 1 second thinking I was going to sell 400,000 copies of my book. I simply wanted to write a book because I'd set that as a goal. So whether it sold a copy or not, I set out to achieve something that I really wanted to achieve. So that's the first thing. I think the answer to your question is, I'd read loads of books, Francois. I'd been to lots of presentations from lots of speakers. And I don't know if this is other people's experience, but I came away from, you know, the Anthony Robbins seminar feeling actually quite empty, because whilst I felt really, really highly motivated for a period of time, I'd put the book down and think, right, you know, that's it, I'm going to change the world. Or I'd come away from a conference thinking, that's it, I can do anything I set my mind to. Usually within 2 or 3 days, something called life had got in the way. You know, again, there was a million reasons. The little voice had taken over and had told me all the reasons why I shouldn't do this, this, and this. And we're conditioned to set realistic goals rather than unrealistic goals. And all those things basically contrive to put me back to where I was before. So what I wanted to do in a book was to share ideas, but then give people an action plan at the end of the chapter. So rather than just move from one chapter to the next, I would say you can't move to chapter number 2 until you've completed the exercises of chapter number 1. So if it was a bit on getting a better work-life balance, right, you need to put this structure into place. And when that's done, you move to chapter number 2. And so we go all the way through the 13 chapters, embedding through activity, through action, the various disciplines that someone needs to be successful in this business. So I think that's probably the main reason. Obviously, if I speak at conferences, I mention the book, so people come up to me afterwards and buy a few copies. So I suppose that's helped. But yeah, it's an action book rather than a reading book, if that makes sense. Because I'm all very much about the follow through. I think the follow through is a measure of success. It's not the theory and the analysis, because I know so many very talented people in this business who still are stuck in the starting blocks because they've still got their prospect list and they're still thinking about the ways to do things. You don't get paid for thinking, you get paid for doing.
Yeah. And just before I get to the next question, because I want to lead on from that, just a reminder, you can ask your questions and make comments and things in the chat, please. You're more than welcome. I'm going to get to the questions at the end. If there's any questions specifically that you want to ask Sandro, please do so. We will definitely get to them a little bit closer to the end. But I mean, from these things that you share, you know, in your speaking engagements and in the book and all of that, can you share some of the ideas and skills that you encourage others to adopt and that you see that they find extremely valuable and it has a real impact on their business?
Sure. Well, where to start? Okay, there's various disciplines. Let's pick a few that probably I think people listening and tuning in would find most valuable. First of all, I mentioned it earlier, Francois, which is, you know, most of us don't know how to handle an objection, and we're getting objections thrown at us left, right, and centre at the moment. So the reality is, in my experience, I see advisors confronted with an objection. I don't know, let's say it's, I've got no money at the moment. And we are conditioned to effectively tell a prospect they're wrong. You know, if you've just done a fact find and somebody's told you they've got, you know, 30,000 rand a month of net disposable income, or whatever the figure is, forgive me because I'm not sure how to convert the money here. So, you know, a decent amount of money as a net disposable income. And yet what they're saying to us is they've got no money. There might be lots of reasons why they've got no money in their mind. You know, they're saving for a holiday or some of the other things that they may not necessarily want to volunteer. But we are conditioned to tell them, well, hang on a minute, you've got 30,000 rand a month of net disposable income. The minute we do that, we create conflict. We actually push the client further away. So there's a 3-step process that I've adopted, which if you master this, and it doesn't take a lot of practice, and by the way, I'm not sure how we make this work, Francois, but I'm more than happy to let you have the scripts and the diagrams that we can send over to those who want a copy via a PDF. So we'll work that out towards the end of the show, I'm sure.
Yeah, we can.
The 3-step process, very, very simple. The first step is not to create conflict, but to welcome the objection. In other words, to say to someone who's just said, I've got no money, thank you for being so honest, or that's a great point you've just raised, or I'm so pleased you mentioned that. Because the first thing you do is you disconnect the client from the negative thought that they have. In other words, you disarm the negative. Nice and easy. Step number 1, welcome the objection. Step number 2, you've got to create empathy. Empathy is a basic building block of all human interaction, and empathy can be created in one simple sentence. Francois, if I were you, I would be thinking the same way. That's empathy right there in one simple sentence. Step number 3 is the bit that takes the practice. Now, as we know, people buy based on 2 things, an emotional response and a logical response. And logic is left brain, emotion right brain. So what we need to do is we need to get a balance between I know I need it and I also want to do something about it. That's the balance we need. If it's purely a logical thought and there's no emotion attached to it, people won't buy. And if it's purely an emotional reaction with no logic, then they won't buy either. So you've got to get that balance between the 2 things. However, to get a yes 100% of the time, you have to avoid the emotional question. If you start asking emotional questions, you might get yes and you might get no, because it's specific to the client, to the prospect. So the logical question in this particular case is, Francois, if I could show you how I work with my other clients to create money they didn't have before they met me, would that be of value? And if you were to answer that question logically, you cannot say no, because number one, you're saying, well, he's offering to show me how he creates money for other people. Why would I not want to know about that? I'm not asking for the order. I'm not asking for you to become a client. I'm asking to show you logically how I do certain things for other people. And by introducing other people, I create that consensus, which is that basic principle that says, I want to do what everyone else does, because I find comfort in following, like sheep, that's what human beings tend to do, what other people do. So the objection handling process, all you then do is apply the 3-step process to any objection. So another good one at the moment is, we can't meet face to face. Well, follow the 3-step process. If I could share a number of ideas with you that I think would help you to improve your financial position, or have helped my other clients improve their financial position immeasurably without the need to meet face to face, would that be a value? And again, it's very difficult to say no to that. And a lot of people are saying at the moment, well, I can't do Zoom calls. Why not? I mean, a Zoom call can be every bit of as effective as a face-to-face. We'd all love to meet our clients face-to-face, but on the basis that at the moment, all I'm looking to do is gather information, I don't actually need to meet somebody to gather information. I don't need to meet somebody to establish that relationship, to set the rules that I mentioned earlier about us deciding whether we want to work together. In the good old days, we used to build relationships by telephone, because there was no such thing as the internet and Zoom. So, let's not use these things as excuses. But if we can equip ourselves with a really good objection handling technique, we stop fearing the objection. And once we stop fearing the objection, we start asking better questions. So we start engaging with more people. I suppose the other very obvious one is engagement by telephone. I literally despair of the number of financial advisors who call a client, again, no fault of theirs. What they've done historically has been taught that you start by introducing yourself. Hello, my name is Sandro Forte from ABC Insurance Company. And then we wait for a response. The moment that happens, we hand control of the call to our client, because the first thing they say is, ABC Insurance Company, oh, this is a sales call, I'm not interested. And all of a sudden, 5 seconds into the call, we're already fighting the objections. Whereas if I start with I'm sorry, Francois, for calling you at an inconvenient time, or maybe a busy time of the day, is now a good time to speak with you, you're probably going to say yes because you want to know who's calling. I then introduce myself, but instead of pausing at the end of ABC Insurance Company, which invites the prospect to raise an objection, I go straight into the reason for my call. I was speaking with our mutual friend Cobus the other day. He's recently become a client and suggested that we might have a conversation so that I could share some of the ways that I help my clients to become financially more successful, because that's what I specialize in doing, Francois. I specialize in helping people become financially more successful. So now the focus is switched not from ABC Insurance Company, but to our mutual friend Cobus. And if it's a cold call, hopefully not many people are doing those anymore, but if it is a cold call, then I'm simply introducing the concept that I work with local business owners or families in the area. Again, I've got a script for this because we probably don't have time to go through it in detail, but I've got a script and a little diagram. And of course, if you get an objection along the way, you just revert to the objection handling technique that I mentioned earlier. And one other thing, if I may mention it before I forget, because it's really, really important. This is a very, very good time to review our goals. Many of us have goals that we call New Year's resolutions. And we typically wake up on the 1st of January and we say, right, this year I'm going to be #1 in my insurance company, or I'm going to buy a new home or go on holiday, spend more time with the kids. And by the 31st of December, we haven't achieved any of those goals. So the little voice on our shoulder says, don't worry, Francois, you can do it all next year. And all we do is we spend our entire career kicking this can down the road. So one of the techniques that I use to help me achieve my goals is to think of 20 to 30 goals. And before everyone tuning in freaks out thinking I haven't got 20 to 30 goals, if you really break your life down into key areas, spiritual, physical, family, health, all the other things that you want to try and achieve, and think of just 5 or 6 goals, big goals, small goals, realistic, unrealistic, long-term, short-term, just mix them all up. What I do is I write down each goal onto a little postcard, and 2 very important rules. One is you must write the goal as if it's already happened. In other words, it's in the past, and you must describe how that goal felt when you achieved the goal. Now, logically, what I'm saying here makes absolutely no sense, because in your conscious brain, you're thinking, well, I haven't achieved those goals, so why am I talking to myself in the past? The thing is, your subconscious brain does not know the difference between what is real and what is imagined. And I'm going to offer one guarantee to everyone listening into the show today, Francois, and the guarantee is this. If you write all your goals, 20 to 30 of them, on little postcards, and you write them in the past tense, and you describe how you felt when you achieved them, and you mix them all up, big, small, long-term, short-term, I guarantee that at the end of 30 days, because you have to read them like the pages of a book every single day, you don't think about them, just literally read them and then put them down. But you must do this every single day without fail for 30 days. At the end of 30 days, I guarantee people will migrate towards you more readily than before. You will think differently, speak differently, act differently, and you will be heading towards more successful outcomes than when you started this process. And if I'm wrong about this, I will package up a copy of my book and send it to whomsoever has done this. We have to do this on trust, obviously. I will send it to whomsoever, wherever they are in the world, at my own cost as an apology for wasting their time.
That's an amazing offer. So that's definitely, and this pulls to, like, it makes me think of one of the books that I discussed in one of the episodes where they have the same method where they say for 30 days you need to do this or read this thing like 30 days consecutively, and before you can move on to the next thing. So, there's a lot of value in this, and I encourage everybody to take Sandra up on this challenge. And this offer, basically. So let's do that and see what happens. And it's definitely something. And what I'm also thinking about these goals, it's not just about your business or your financial planning business, or it's also about your life. It's anywhere. It's any goal in any part of your life. So this is so much bigger than just, I need to look at my practice and what I'm going to be doing there. You also talk a lot about mindset. It's something that I've been talking a lot about as well, Sandra. And it's something that I think it starts there. With mindset, but why do you feel is mindset? Why is it so important?
Look, if you don't have a positive mindset, I think everything else that I'm talking about today, you can have the biggest toolkit of skills in the world, but if you haven't got the mental ability to pick up the telephone, to be resilient, mindset isn't just about having the motivation from within to make the calls, to do the long days in the car, to suffer rejection, and to continue to pick yourself up and move forward regardless. It's much more than that. It's about looking at situations and, as I mentioned before, flipping them upside down, looking for the positive. And there are times where that's really hard to do. But if you've got a really positive mindset that comes from daily immersion in all the things that you want to achieve, one good example of that is that one of my goals on my mind, I call them mind changers, on my little mind changer card, goes something along the lines of appearing on the front cover of Men's Health magazine has been very fulfilling, and I'm looking and feeling as good as ever. Now, is my goal realistic or unrealistic? The answer is very unrealistic. There's every possibility I will not appear on the front cover of Men's Health magazine. But the point here is it's not, and going back to what we've heard many times before, something called a SMART goal. I don't believe in SMART goals, to be honest. Why? Because they might be specific, they might be immeasurable, they might be achievable. The issue comes from this word realistic. And when I was young, I would hear parents say to me, who was talking about being an astronaut and a atomic scientist, they would pat me on the head condescendingly and they would say, you might want to kind of set your bar just a little bit lower. And it was based on their own expectations, their own experiences. And I think as a parent, one of the things we should never do is limit our kids' thinking. You know, at this stage in their lives, in their development, just let them dream big. You know, that's where the great outcomes come from being really unrealistic. And if I set myself, 5 times top of the table as a production level, and I only get to 3 times, it's still a pretty good outcome. So having a really, really strong mindset is very important, but it needs to be a mindset that is not look yourself in the mirror and say, Sandro, today is going to be a great day. It has to be part of you. It has to be subconscious. And the only way you can do that, Francois, is you've got to repeat this subconscious process that I've mentioned, whether it's, the daily reading of a few pages of a good book, whether it's doing one thing that will lead to a positive outcome every single day, something you can control, whether it's your mind changer cards, connecting in a positive way, doing something philanthropic, anything that creates a positive feeling or thought helps to strengthen your mindset and therefore your mental approach to an outcome. If you can then combine that with great skills, you have a great business. You have a really, really great business. And I don't care whether you're 21 or 61, whether you've been in the business for 5 minutes or 50 years, the outcomes will be exactly the same.
Awesome. So you've got a positive mindset, you've got a process, you look at all of that stuff. But what are some of the common mistakes that you see people make in business? We can bring it back to financial planning practices as well, but let's talk about business in general. What are some of the common mistakes you see people make over and over and over again, and not moving past that? And that's actually the thing that holds them back.
I mentioned before that people spend too much time thinking about themselves. And what I mean by that is, how often do you see somebody write on a letter, I will call you in a few days to see if you've made a decision, or to see if you want to engage with me? How often do you see on a LinkedIn or social media message, what I'd like to do is? So first thing is, forget all that. It's not about you. It's about your clients and prospects. But I think the answer to your question would be 3 things, Francois. And this is a really good takeaway. I picked this up from somebody else, actually. But I've created almost like a mantra in my business. And I would say something very simple, which is a 3-part process to becoming iconic in our business. And when I say iconic, I mean a person to whom people migrate, prospects, clients. And if you are iconic, you get referred more readily, you open doors more easily, you get greater outcomes more readily. And becoming an icon is about 3 things. Number 1, developing a great personality. When I talk about personality, I don't mean, being a joker. I just mean develop the art of being engaging. And engaging is about this very important word, which, again, I see advisors do their preamble, ice break, whatever you want to call it, at the first meeting. And then they start saying, right, I'm going to gather some information. And then once they've done that, say, okay, Francois, what you need is, and then they start listing all the things that the client needs. Again, that's the wrong approach. At the first meeting, before I even ask any questions, my first question to all my prospects is, what do you want? If you could close your eyes and imagine a financial outcome for yourself and your family, what would it be? Because the thing I've learned in 30 years is that what people want will always be greater than what people need. And once you let the reins off and you allow them to imagine outcomes, they're mostly unrealistic. You may never get them there. But if they set that bar really, really high, you've got loads more to work with. So developing an engaging personality, understanding what people want rather than telling them what they need, building great relationships. I phone every one of my clients on their birthday for no other reason than it's to wish them many happy returns of the day. It's a unique experience for them because no other professional calls you on your birthday, do they? It's friends and family generally. So subconsciously you develop yourself as part of their inner circle. Little things like that get you referred, get you liked, get you trusted. So that's number one. The second thing is education. And when I say education, I don't mean you have to have a degree in financial planning. I do not mean that you have to have vast experience in the business. I just mean that you need to know your stuff, whether that's understanding how to handle objection, being good on the telephone, sending good social media messages, which is not about your prospect, not about you, but about your prospect, etc., etc. So it's about knowing your stuff. And then really the third one, which is the most important, especially at the moment, is visibility. This is the time to be visible. And howsoever you do it, whether it's posts on social media, going through your telephone directory, hi, how are you? Is there anything I can do for you? Recently, I purchased, for not very much money, £450, I think, a 79-page digital, kind of like an e-help book for people dealing with COVID-19 and all that brings. I didn't produce it. I bought it. I've sent it all out to my client. And it's kind of like a self-help guide from staying fit and well to dealing with kind of incarceration to philanthropy to community service, as well as some financial planning stuff as well. And the feedback that I've had from clients has been really positive. But I try to engage with clients. This is another little rule of mine. I call them touch points. If you can touch the lives, if you can connect with people on average 5 to 7 times a year, that is the optimum number of connections. Too few and you get forgotten. Too many and you become annoying. So visibility is a very important part of that process. So it's about personality, it's about education, knowing your stuff, and it's about being very, very visible, especially at the moment because so many other people are invisible.
Those are amazing points, and yeah, I made some notes here, so it's very valuable. Thank you, Sandra. And I want to do some quick fire questions, which is I want to touch on some of the things that you're doing, but I want to go through them quite quickly. The one thing is that you've got this success masterclass, a 2-day masterclass that you offer. Can you tell us just a little bit about that, and how does that work? Is it face to face, or is it something you can do online? How does that work?
Oh, again, it's always been face-to-face, but of course we've had to adapt that now. So the masterclass is really everything that we've been talking about today. It is the A to Z or A to Z of success in financial services, from engaging new prospects right the way through to providing a level of world-class service. Unusually, when I say unusually, I don't know of anyone else offering this, but what I don't do is I don't turn up to a group of people, whether it's online or face-to-face, and say, right, what we're going to do is I'm going to teach you how to sell financial services and then walk away with the check in my pocket. I want to offer a guarantee in the same way that I offered the guarantee earlier on about the mind changers. So my 2-day masterclass comes with a guarantee that I will help people to increase production based on their 12 previous months of production within 90 days to a level of at least 30%. If they don't achieve at least 30% production increase within 90 days, providing, of course, they implement all the ideas that we share, they will get the investment in the masterclass returned to them, no quibbles whatsoever. So that's probably the easiest way I can answer your question in the time that we've got left.
Yeah, that's good stuff. And then also you've got a podcast that you started in 2018 already. I know I'm subscribed to that. About just why did you start this podcast?
Well, look, right at the top of the show, I mentioned how important it is to give back. I have 23-year-old twins. I'm a very proud dad of a lovely lad called Tom and a beautiful daughter called Ellie, who's both of whom have given me a grandchild now, which is astonishing that I'm not even 52 and a grandfather to 2. But they are classic millennials, Francois. So when I started the podcast, what I realized was I was speaking to some amazing clients. I've got some fantastic clients which have developed over the years. I mentioned sports stars and celebrities in particular. And what I would find myself doing at these various meetings with them is they'd come out with these little sound bites or lovely nuggets of information. And I kept sharing some of these anecdotes with my twin children. and they would kind of absorb them. And then I thought to myself, either I've got to write another book with all this amazing information, or I've got to do something a bit more modern world. And my son, who's very IT savvy, and I sit in awe looking at you, Francois, with all this amazing equipment and the way that you run the show, and you know what's going on LinkedIn. I've got no clue. But he said, why don't you do a podcast? So anyway, somehow I pulled it all together, and 106 podcasts later, I just seem to have the great and good from society coming to me to be a podcast guest. They're not designed to do anything other than to share information with society. How did you become successful? How did you overcome a significant challenge in your life? What are the rules by which you live? So much amazing information. And all I do is facilitate the sharing of that information in a 30-minute podcast. It's the Sandro Forte podcast. The handle is @Sandro's podcast, and it's on iTunes and Stitcher, I believe. So yeah, very humble offering to society. I fund it all myself. Any money from advertising goes to charity because I raise a lot of money for charity. But the most important thing, Francois, is it's designed to give something back to people who might be struggling a little bit at the moment.
Wow, yeah, that's awesome. And then you also now touched on something which was my last quick fire question is, Ross also spoke about philanthropy and how important that is. There's a lot of people that's been talking about giving and serving, and doing it from that way. And I know that philanthropy is also very important to you, and you actually touched on that. You've raised a lot of money, I think in excess, and I don't know how to convert this, but 14 million pounds. I mean, that must be well over 300 million rand that you've raised, to help others. Why is this so important to you? I mean, where does that come from? First of all, when my father passed when I was 9 years old, my mum, as I mentioned earlier, was a widow at a very young age. She was made bankrupt 2 years later, no will, no life insurance in place. And then the same thing actually happened to my stepfather, who joined the family when I was 13 and passed away when I was 24. So my poor mum's been through 3 marriages, through no fault of her own. It's just the way it's worked. I've seen some really tough times in my life. And of course, we've all seen tough times for other people. You only have to walk the streets of London to see people living in doorways and so on. And somebody shared with me a little while ago, I forget who it was, but they said something to me like, if you wake up in the morning, it's going to be a good day. And what they meant by that was, we are all so blessed. Everyone listening to this show is listening to the show because they have a computer. They probably have already had a coffee or a meal today. They have a roof over their head. And if you have those things, you are in the top 2% of wealthiest people in the world. So we need to take this opportunity to apply a little bit of perspective. And when I see some of the struggles of people, I feel it is my duty, I think it's everyone's duty, to give a little bit back, to go out of our way, to spend an hour or two in a week. It doesn't have to be a lot of time, and just do something positive for society. Because I tell you what, it always makes me feel better about myself. It does give me that constant perspective, which is so important to maintain disciplines in our business. And if you can change the life of one person, I think you've done something phenomenal. So all I've ever tried to do, I've pounded the streets of London, run a couple of marathons and done some really crazy things. But it's just to make the world a better place. I know we will never achieve that utopia, Francois, but if I can do my bit, then I'm delighted to. And I would actively encourage others to do it. If you see somebody on a street corner, maybe don't give them some money, go and buy them a sandwich, help them eat for a day. You don't have to do something significant. Start your own charity. I do have my own foundation, and I do sit on a board of trustees for a foundation, but just do something, because it will make a material difference to your life and to the lives of others. Yeah, and it's just that thing. You do something for someone else, you're doing it for yourself just as much, even if that's not your intention. And it always comes back as well. If it's from the right place and with the right intention and the right reason why you're doing it, then it's amazing what one can achieve through that. I want to run through some questions that some of the people have been asking, Sandro, if you don't mind. I've got a question here from Philip on LinkedIn. So he says, and you're also welcome, Sandro, by the way, to afterwards, because this is recorded, to go and check out the comments if there's anything specifically that we miss, if you want to answer them.
Sure.
Philip is asking, we have many new advisors joining our industry and starting out. What is your advice for someone new and the most important thing that they should focus on?
Hi, Philip. First of all, thank you for the question. Look, things haven't changed over the centuries. The same process is as successful today, if you get it right, as it's ever been. And I think that we need to avoid using this current situation, as tragic as it is for so many people, the loss of life and all the difficulties created, is that when you're new to the business, the most important thing, and I know everyone's anticipating this answer, but it is true, is that activity is the most important thing. The reality is that even as a new advisor, you probably know much, much more than your prospect, regardless of how experienced they might be in life or in business. You know more about your subject than they do. So this is a time to become really active. And as a young advisor, I would simply do a number of things. I would reach out to family and friends. Now, I know that's difficult. And my approach to my families and friends would be softer. In other words, I wouldn't be asking for the order. Sorry to use a really kind of old-fashioned phrase, but I wouldn't be asking for the order because, as we know, if you lose the opportunity with a prospect, you don't have that door opened again. So we need to make sure we leave the door open. I lost my dad when I was young. I lost my stepfather. So the message that I would share with friends and family was, my own personal experience says that it would be remiss of me not to at least share some thoughts and ideas with you. I'm not asking for you to become a client. I'm not placing you under any pressure or obligation, but it is my duty to share some thoughts and ideas. May I do that? May I share a few thoughts and ideas with no expectation of an outcome? That generally leads to a very positive outcome because you remove that sense of obligation. I would communicate as much as I can on social media. There's a world of posts and information that's available through insurance companies. Just post a couple of things a week, couple of comments, maybe start a podcast. 42% of my new podcast guests, that's not the ones that were already clients, have become clients, because inevitably, if you're sitting in a studio for half an hour with a new prospect, they ask you about what you do and you have a conversation. So all of those new advisors, I fundamentally believe, can fill in a fact find. They can ask questions like, what do you want? But the thing that most people struggle with is filling their diary with good quality meetings. And that's really from a lack of activity. So engage with professional people, but don't pick up the phone and say, you're a lawyer, can I come and talk to you? Or can we have a Zoom call about me being introduced to your clients? Because they will say no. But if you are a financial professional, there's a very good possibility, particularly if you're looking to provide a truly holistic service, that many of your clients will want a legal service. So call a lawyer that you might have heard about that comes highly regarded and ask them whether or not you can have a conversation with them about introducing your clients to them. They're in the same business as we are, prospecting. They will say yes. Have a conversation, talk about their business, talk about yours. This is a time to have loads and loads and loads of conversations. And again, I've got a dozen scripts that I can send out if you want, in terms of some of the words and phrases that you use, some of those key messages. But it is, I'm afraid, no easy way to dress this up. It's all about activity. And the more you engage, the more successful you will be.
Awesome. Then we've got Stephen from Australia. He said good morning this morning. It was said it's a real honor to have you here live with us. He's asking here, Sandra, how do you handle objections in advance? And I think we've addressed this a little bit, but I want to read the question to you. And what language do you use when talking about the cost of preparing advice? And would love any handouts or scripts you have to share with us. So yeah, we'll make a plan with that to get it out to everybody. Yeah. And but yeah, so that is Stephen's question.
Okay. So again, if probably to save a bit of time, the objection handling technique, just use the same three-step process. But in respect to fees, here's a very important part of that first meeting that I mentioned. So I do two things. The reason we're meeting is for us to decide whether we can work together. It's for me to gather information, but that is my same opportunity to share some other rules of engagement. And one of the things that I say is, Stephen, the other thing I need to let you know is that I'm paid in two ways. Assuming we reach a successful outcome, assuming I decide to work with you and you decide to work with me, if we engage, I'm going to get paid in two ways. One way is I'm going to get paid a fee, whether it's by you or whether it's by the insurance company that I work for. And the other way is by personal introduction rather than referral. Personal introduction, because all of my clients, when they find that what I do for them leads to successful outcomes, most of them are very kind to introduce me to other people. So introduce that concept of how you get paid very early in the process so that you don't end up having to react to the objection right at the 11th hour when they say, wow, you know, you're going to get paid how much? Deal with it and be proud of the fact that you're being paid money to solve a financial problem. I really struggle with advisors say, oh, I can't mention the fact I'm earning such a lot of money. Again, perspective is required. Let's put this into some kind of context. If you get paid a lot of money, you have created a very large financial solution for a client. So it's a large life insurance policy. It's a large investment. It's all relative. And the other thing I say to clients, which is a very important message, is, Stephen, if we build this relationship, as I hope we will over the next 20 years, there will be many occasions where I do a lot of work and I don't get paid anything. There will be other occasions where I do work for you that might lead to a financial outcome, a fee or a commission for me. But over the course of 20 years, what will happen is that it will kind of roughly smooth itself out. In other words, there will be times I do a lot of work for nothing. Other times I do relatively little for what appears to be a lot. But over the course of time, it will average itself out. Does that sound reasonable? And logically, people are going to say, well, yeah, that does sound really fair. So when you then come to do the next transaction, I'll call it that, and the client says, oh, wait a minute, you're earning, 100,000 Rand or whatever the figure is. You say, do you remember the conversation we had right back at the beginning? Because that was one of the rules that you established with the client. So do you remember that conversation we had right back at the beginning? And I explained that. And then the client says, oh, yeah, actually, okay, no problem. So dealing with objections, and if you are young in the business, inexperienced, you commonly get certain objections, deal with them at the beginning as part of that preamble. So what I find, Stephen, when I'm engaging with my new clients is many of them will say, well, you work for ABC Insurance Company. They've had quite a lot of bad press recently. Let me deal with that before we go any further. Because if you don't, the client's going to be thinking about it all the way through the process. So there's the 3-step technique, but there's also the fact that it's your agenda at the first meeting. There is the possibility you can say, let me deal with a few other things before we go any further. And if you get them out on the table, there is no elephant in the room. That would be my best advice.
Amazing. Thank you. Sandra, yeah, there's a lot of comments and things on YouTube as well, thanking you for your time and how valuable it's been. There's really been just positive feedback all around. So we've run out of time, but I want to thank you personally from my side as well. Thank you very much for everything that you've so graciously offered and just, shared with us. I really, really appreciate it. And I think on behalf of every single person that's watching live and that's going to watch this recording, thank you very much for your time and for everything that you do. I wish you all the best and that you'll have a good time, that I will get to meet you someday in person. That'll be really awesome for me.
Well, and kudos to you, Francois. Keep doing what you're doing. It's amazing.
Thank you very much, Sandra. We'll definitely do that. Guys, thank you very much. I'll be back tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. I will see you then and have a good day. I will see you tomorrow.